Hey, hi everyone. My name is Pavan, and if you have seen my previous videos, you would know by now that I'm trying to record some videos for questions that I could get asked, could get asked during front-end interview questions. Uh, Trying to focus more on the front-end part. I'll also go into some other topics, but I'll do those later on. So for the one that I'm going to do today, uh, I feel this is a question that could get asked, and it helps you test on understanding how DOM works and how you could actually store references for DOM. So let's go ahead with implementing this. So what's this question about? So today with ES6 maps, you can very much set a DOM and store some value in it. Uh, the advantage you get by that is that if you want to store some value for a given element, you could always do that by using the DOM itself as the key. Until the DOM is there, map will have the reference for it. If you're using a weak map, it would get destroyed. But in non-weak map, the reference would still be alive, and you could store a value for it. You can not do that today with the primitive data types, which is available in JavaScript, especially object, where in object you cannot set a key as an object itself. It needs to be a string all the time when you're trying to assign a key for an object. So if we were asked to implement something like this, but without using the ES6 maps, how would we go about doing that, especially for storing a value for a DOM node? So let's go about implementing this. So the way this is how older versions of JavaScript libraries used to work, uh, like YUI or even jQuery. You would see that it usually would add a unique ID or a data element or a data attribute to the node, which would be used by the library to keep a reference of it, so that when you want to retrieve uh, value for a given DOM, you can do a get element by ID and get that ID and then check for a data structure that we are holding inside, which could be an object, and see if there's a value for that given ID. So let's use the same approach. So when we are trying to set a value, first let's see if there is an ID for the node or not. Uh, I'm going to use data ID as a way. Now, if data ID is not there, what I'm going to do is just use date.now, just a random date. Uh, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set attribute data ID as ID. Now, you could probably avoid doing this. If there is already a node get attribute ID, you might not want to do this, but I'm just assigning an ID to it all the time. And I'm going to keep a map with me, which is going to be an object. So let's first check if it exists or not. If it doesn't exist, assign an empty value to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ID, okay, and assign the value to it. So as you saw, what I did is very simple. Kept a private object, not truly private, private with conventional naming, where we are using underscore to define a private variable, and have it as an empty object. Assign an ID to the node, which is a data ID, and the ID would either be the value which is already there, or it could just be a random date that we use at that given point of time. We use date now so that we don't have duplicates on the page. We only have one occurrence of it all the time. Okay, and for the get ID, we're going to do the same thing over here. We are going to retrieve the ID, and what we are just going to do is return from the map that we have stored the value in the ID. And for the hash, we can just do get of node and use the double exclamation mark, which actually which gives you a boolean back, which tells you if the value exists or not. Now let's try running this code and see what happens. Cool, awesome. So that was the implementation for it. Very simple. Use a data attribute and assign an unique value to it. I'm using date, and have a private variable, which is using the ID as the key and storing the value for it, so that when you are trying to get a value for a node, you first get the ID and check the value for it. Thank you, folks. This was a very simple, create a simple store for a DOM element question that I believe could get asked. And if it gets asked, this is a very simple approach that you could take. You could probably do much more over here, but for the sake of interview, I like to keep things simple, and this is the solution for it. Thank you, folks. We'll stop recording now.